All right, so this one is pretty interesting. A text outlining 13 biblical lessons.
Yeah.
And it claims to be like a roadmap
Mm-hmm.
to personal transformation. So like a spiritual to-do list.
That's a good way to put it. And what's interesting is how the source frames these lessons
Yeah.
not as these lofty ideals,
Right.
but as practical tools for everyday living.
Okay, so taking these ancient teachings and applying them
Exactly.
to modern life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just about knowing the verses.
Right.
It's about living them.
Absolutely.
So let's unpack these 13 lessons one by one
Okay.
and see what they might mean for you listening right now.
Sounds good. And we should definitely pay attention to how they all connect.
Okay.
Because there's a flow here,
Oh.
starting with a foundation of forgiveness.
Okay, so the source really emphasizes that forgiveness isn't just like a one-time thing,
Yeah.
but a continual process.
Mm-hmm.
It even quotes Matthew 18.21,
Right.
forgive 70 times, 7 times. I mean, what's the source really trying to say here?
I think the source is getting at how deeply forgiveness needs to run.
Okay.
It's not about just saying the words, but it's about addressing those deep-seated feelings of
Right.
resentment.
Uh-huh.
Remember that image of carrying a heavy weight?
Yeah.
Well, there's actually research that shows that holding on to anger and bitterness
Really?
has consequences
Wow.
for your mental and physical health.
So forgiveness is almost like self-care.
Yeah.
As much as it is about the other person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's freeing yourself from that burden.
Right.
And the source really doesn't shy away from the challenges of forgiveness, especially when you can't reconcile
Right.
with the person who hurt you.
Like when that person is gone
Yeah.
or just not receptive to their love.
Exactly. So the source talks about this importance of internal forgiveness,
Okay.
that process of letting go of the resentment
Mhm.
within yourself, even if you can't confront the person.
So how do you do that? Is it just mind over matter?
Well, the source suggests turning to prayer
Okay.
as a way to find that inner peace.
Mm-hmm.
So it's seeking strength and understanding from a higher power
Right.
to help you move through those difficult emotions.
So tapping into something beyond ourselves.
Precisely. And that concept of relying on something bigger than ourselves ties directly to the next lesson,
Right.
loving your neighbor as yourself.
That's the famous command from Mark 12.31.
Yes.
Easy to say, but putting it into practice,
Right.
that's a whole other story.
It is. And the source challenges us to imagine a world where this principle is truly lived out,
Okay.
where genuine care and respect for others are the norm.
Mm-hmm.
What would society look like if
Yeah.
everyone took this to heart?
It's a pretty radical idea, especially today when individualism seems to trump everything else.
Right.
Yeah.
But this radical love is possible, especially when it's rooted in forgiveness.
So you can't love your neighbor if you're still harboring all this resentment and bitterness.
Exactly. Forgiveness creates space
Okay.
for empathy, for understanding other people's struggles,
Right.
and offering support even when it's hard.
So forgiveness lays the groundwork for compassion.
Precisely. And the source gives some practical examples of what this love in action might look like.
Like what?
Imagine, helping a colleague
Yeah.
who's overwhelmed or being there for a friend going through a tough time.
Right, those are everyday expressions of love.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got forgiveness and love as our foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we go from there?
Well, things get a little more intense.
Okay.
Because the source takes us to the story of Job,
Oh, Job.
a man who faced unimaginable loss
Yeah.
and suffering but remained faithful.
Job's story is not for the faint of heart.
No, it's not.
He loses everything, family, possessions, health.
Yeah.
It's like a biblical horror movie.
It's definitely a test of faith,
Yeah.
but the source isn't highlighting Job's suffering just for shock value.
Okay.
It's about emphasizing the power of trusting God in the face of adversity. No matter what, Job never wavers in his belief
Okay.
in God's purpose.
But how do you maintain that trust when everything around you is falling apart?
Mm-hmm.
That's easier said than done.
Absolutely. And the source acknowledges that this kind of trust requires constant work.
Okay.
It talks about practical tools like prayer,
Mm,
finding comfort in scripture,
right.
and seeking support from your faith community.
So it's not about having like this superhuman faith.
Yeah.
It's about leaning on those supports when things get tough.
Exactly. And what's interesting?
Let's say.
Job's trust wasn't rooted in arrogance or
Right.
this belief in his own strength,
Yeah.
but the opposite,
Humility.
a deep humility before God.
Which brings us perfectly to our next lesson.
Yeah.
Humility.
Humility.
The source brings up Philippians 2.3-4,
Mm-hmm.
urging us to avoid selfish ambition
Right.
and consider others better than ourselves.
And it's not about being meek,
Okay.
or putting ourselves down. It's about creating a community of support
Mhm.
and recognizing that inherent value in every person.
So less about self-deprecation,
Right.
more about fostering equality and mutual respect.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective
Yeah.
can really have an impact on
That's a good
how
one.
we interact with others.
Yeah.
Imagine a workplace where everyone prioritizes collaboration
Okay.
and gives credit where credit is due,
Right.
or family discussions where people truly listen
Yeah.
and value each other's opinions even when they disagree.
Okay. I'm starting to see how these lessons build on each other.
Yeah.
Forgiveness leads to love. Love fosters a sense of community.
Yes.
And humility allows us to function within that community.
It all fits together.
But then the source takes us into this abstract idea of living by faith, not by sight,
Oh, yeah.
quoting 2 Corinthians 5:7.
That's a big one.
Yeah. What do you make of this?
This is about trusting in God's promises,
Okay.
even when you can't see the results.
Mhm.
It's about that deep inner conviction that guides you,
Okay.
even when things are challenging.
The source uses this image of a boat in the middle of the ocean,
Oh, yeah.
relying only on a compass.
Right.
You can't see land,
Mm-hmm.
but you trust the compass.
Exactly.
I like that.
Powerful image.
But living by faith isn't always smooth sailing.
You got that right.
How do we apply this
Yeah.
when we're facing like big life decisions
Mm-hmm.
or when doubt creeps in?
Yeah. How do we actually do this?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And the source seems to suggest that the answer might lie in the power of prayer,
Interesting.
which is conveniently the next lesson on our list.
Okay.
It brings up James 5:16,
Mm-hmm.
which talks about prayer being powerful and effective, particularly for the righteous.
And the source presents prayer as this two-way street.
Okay.
It's about communicating with God,
Right.
sharing your hopes and fears, but also strengthening your relationship.
Okay, so it's not just sending up like a wish list.
Right.
It's about cultivating a connection with the divine.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many different ways to approach prayer.
There are.
What are some?
Well, the source talks about prayer as expressing gratitude,
Okay.
seeking guidance and wisdom, and
Mhm.
praying for others.
Right?
And to illustrate this, it brings in Daniel
Daniel.
praying 3 times a day, even when it was forbidden.
Talk about commitment.
Right. Daniel's story highlights the importance of consistent prayer no matter what.
Yeah.
And think about the impact our prayers can have for others. It's
Right.
like this web of support and positive energy.
Force multiplier.
I like that. And when you combine prayer with a desire to seek wisdom,
Okay.
that's when things get really interesting.
Which takes us to the next lesson.
Yeah.
The value of wisdom.
Wisdom.
Proverbs 4:7 calls wisdom the principal thing.
It is.
And the source really dives into what that means.
So it's not just about knowing things. It's about making sound judgments.
Right.
And living a life that honors God.
The source compares wisdom to a lantern that illuminates your path in darkness.
I love that image.
It's beautiful.
It is.
And the source doesn't just say, hey, go seek wisdom.
Right.
It gives you concrete ways to do it.
Like what?
Studying scripture,
Mhm.
prayer,
Yeah.
seeking guidance from mentors.
It's about being proactive.
So it's about being proactive in our pursuit of wisdom.
Exactly. And it connects this to Solomon, asking God for wisdom to rule justly.
Okay.
So wisdom isn't just for personal gain.
Right.
It's about serving others and making the world better.
Okay, so we've got this foundation of forgiveness and love.
Yeah.
We're building our spiritual muscles through trust, humility, faith, prayer, and wisdom.
That's a lot.
But then the source throws us a curveball,
Okay.
this whole concept of God's sovereignty and justice.
Uh-oh.
It even pulls in Romans 9.15:16,
Oh, that's a tricky one.
which is a notoriously tricky passage.
It is.
He talks about how God chooses to show mercy to some and hardens the hearts of others.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hard one to wrap our heads around.
Yeah, especially through our limited human understanding of fairness.
Yeah. The source admits this can be a hard pill to swallow.
It is.
How are we supposed to reconcile this with our own sense of right and wrong?
I think it comes down to surrendering to the mystery of God's plan.
Okay.
The source uses an analogy of a child trusting their parents' decisions, even if the child doesn't fully understand
Right.
why the parent is making those choices.
So acknowledging we don't have all the answers and trusting that God's ways are higher than ours?
Exactly. And the source suggests that this concept of God's sovereignty can actually be a source of comfort.
Really?
Especially when we're facing difficult times.
Okay.
Knowing that God is ultimately in control even when things seem chaotic
Right.
can bring peace.
So in the midst of all the uncertainty,
Yeah.
there's this underlying certainty in God's plan. I get that. But then the source takes us on another sharp turn.
Okay.
This time it's all about the call to evangelize.
Evangelism.
It brings up Matthew 28.1920, the Great Commission,
Yes.
where Jesus instructs his followers to go and make disciples of all nations.
That's a big task.
Yeah, so we're talking about sharing our faith with others.
Yes.
But I think a lot of people struggle with this idea.
I think so too.
It can feel awkward or pushy,
Especially today.
especially in today's world.
Yes.
The source seems sensitive to that.
It is.
It emphasizes that evangelism doesn't have to be these grand pronouncements or forcing your beliefs on others.
Right.
It can be as simple as living a life that reflects the teachings of Jesus and being open to sharing your faith when the opportunity arises.
Exactly.
So more about being a living example
Yes.
than going on a crusade to
Right.
convert everyone you meet.
Uses this image of evangelism as spreading light.
I like that.
Each new believer becomes like a candle,
Okay.
illuminating the world.
Beautiful.
And the more candles there are, the
Yeah.
brighter the world becomes.
But can we really expect everyone to suddenly become these shining beacons of faith?
Of course not.
I mean, it would be nice.
It would be. But that's where the next lesson comes in.
Okay.
The importance of cultivating the fruit of the Spirit.
That's Galatians 5.22223.
Yes.
Love, joy, peace,
Yes.
patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control.
It's quite a list.
Like a spiritual fruit salad.
It is, and the source points out that these qualities
Right.
aren't just things we're born with.
Right.
They need to be cultivated.
Like tending a garden.
Exactly. You have to put in the work to make those fruits grow.
So being intentional about developing these qualities within ourselves.
Exactly. And it gives some examples of what this might look like.
Like what?
Practicing patience when you're stuck in traffic or choosing kindness when dealing with a difficult customer service rep.
It's about putting those virtues into action.
Yes.
Not just thinking about them.
And it's not just about being a good person. It's about reflecting the character of God.
Right. Aligning our actions with our beliefs.
Precisely. And this outward expression of faith flows into the next lesson.
Okay, what's that?
The responsibility of service.
How's
The
that?
source brings in the parable of the sheep and the goats
Okay.
from Matthew 25.3540.
Mm-hmm.
It's a story that teaches us that serving others,
Okay.
especially those in need,
Right.
is directly linked to serving God.
So putting our faith into action
Yeah,
through acts of compassion and kindness.
exactly. And it doesn't have to be these big gestures or huge sacrifices. Even small acts of service can make a big difference.
It's about consistently looking for ways to help others, even in simple ways.
And what's interesting is that the source points out that serving others isn't just beneficial for the recipient,
Okay.
but it also transforms the person doing the serving.
It will win-win.
Exactly.
Sound like that.
And this emphasis on service actually prepares us for the next lesson,
Well, we just-
vigilance and preparation.
Okay, so here, the source brings up Matthew 24.4243,
Right.
where Jesus warns us to be ready for his second coming.
It's about staying spiritually alert and prepared.
So are we talking about prepping for the apocalypse?
Well, not exactly. It's more about living each day with integrity and purpose,
Okay.
knowing that our choices matter.
Right, so not just prepping for some future event,
Right.
but living with integrity now.
Exactly. And the source offers tips for this vigilance,
Like what?
prayer, Bible study, and self-reflection.
So it's like a spiritual checkup,
Yeah, you could say that.
making sure our actions match our words. But then the source takes us to what might be the most comforting lesson of all,
What's that?
the promise of resurrection.
Ah, yes.
It dives into 1 Corinthians 15.20022,
Okay.
which emphasizes that Christ's resurrection guarantees our own.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah, a powerful message of hope and reassurance.
Is.
The source describes it as a light at the end of the tunnel, a promise of eternal life with God.
And it explores how this belief can change our perspective on life and death and everything.
It encourages us to face challenges with courage, knowing that this earthly life isn't all there is.
Exactly. And it gives us reason to find meaning even in suffering.
Right.
Knowing that our pain has purpose in God's plan.
It's about finding solace in the midst of grief,
Yeah.
knowing that death is not the end, but a transition to something much greater.
And it's about living each day with gratitude and purpose,
Okay.
appreciating the gift of life, and using our time wisely.
Wow, what a journey through these first 13 lessons.
It is.
It's amazing how they build on each other, creating this roadmap for spiritual growth and transformation.
And it's remarkable how these ancient teachings
Yeah.
still resonate with us today.
So for you listening, we want to hear from you.
Yeah.
What's resonating with you the most from these first 13 lessons?
Mhm.
What's one thing you're going to take away
Yeah.
and try to apply to your own life?
Good question.
Hold on to that thought, and we'll continue exploring these lessons in our next segment.
Sounds good. You know, it's incredible how these lessons, while being so old, speak to us today.
Yeah, it's like this timeless wisdom for navigating life.
And I think what's so powerful is how it doesn't just address, like, the spiritual side.
Okay.
It connects our faith to our relationships, our actions, even our impact on the world.
So living out your faith in a holistic way.
Exactly.
It's not just about going to church.
Right.
It's about how you show up every day.
Yeah, and the source makes it clear that it's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about this journey of growth and transformation.
So embracing the process.
Yeah,
Knowing we're going to mess up.
we all do.
And that's okay.
It's about getting back up and trying again.
Right. And having the humility to recognize that we don't have it all figured out.
We're all works in progress.
That humility piece is so important.
It is.
Especially today when everyone's supposed to be so self-sufficient.
It's about letting go of the ego
Yeah.
and surrendering to something bigger.
And that surrender, that trust seems to run through all these lessons.
It does, doesn't it?
Whether it's trusting in God's plan or choosing to live by faith or seeking wisdom through prayer, it's about acknowledging we don't have all the answers.
And being okay with that.
Yeah, even embracing the mystery
Exactly.
and finding peace in that surrender.
But the source says this path of faith isn't always easy.
Oh, absolutely.
There will be setbacks, doubts,
Yeah.
times when you want to give up.
Anyone who's tried to live out their faith knows
Yeah.
that it's not all sunshine and roses,
Those dark nights of the soul.
right? When you question everything.
And the source doesn't pretend it's easy,
Okay.
but it says to lean on your faith community during those times.
Oh, yeah.
It talks about the power of groups, Bible studies,
Yeah.
even just connecting with like-minded people who can support you.
So having a spiritual support system.
Exactly. People who get what you're going through and
Right.
can help you get back on track.
I think that interconnectedness is illustrated so well through that idea of the fruit of the Spirit.
Those qualities: love, joy, peace, patience.
Yeah.
They're not meant to be cultivated alone.
Right.
They flourish in a community.
Like those fruits need the right soil
Exactly.
to grow.
And as we nurture those qualities, we become better equipped to serve others, which in turn strengthens our own faith.
It's like this upward spiral
It is.
where everyone benefits,
And it leads us to a deeper understanding of God's love and purpose.
which brings us back to vigilance and preparation.
Right. Living with an awareness of the bigger picture, that internal perspective.
Not just being ready for some future event,
Yeah.
but living each day with purpose.
Exactly. Making the most of our time
Right.
and using our gifts to make a difference.
Not getting caught up in all the distractions,
Right.
drama.
Staying focused on what matters
Yeah.
and connected to the source of our strength.
So like we're running a marathon. We got to pace ourselves,
Yeah.
keep our eyes on the prize, and take care of ourselves along the way.
And the source says the finish line isn't just about us. It's about the triumph of good over evil.
That gives me chills.
It's this cosmic struggle,
Well-
and our choices matter.
So how do we make sure we're on the right side?
Yeah.
The world feels so chaotic sometimes. How do we even know what the right side is?
Well, that's where all those lessons come in.
Okay.
It's about cultivating those virtues: forgiveness, love, humility, faith, wisdom.
Right.
Those are the qualities that align us with God's will.
So not just following rules,
Right.
but developing our character
Exactly.
and letting love guide our actions.
It's about becoming the best versions of ourselves
I like that.
so we can make the world better. It's a tall order.
It is, but that's what it's all about.
It's not just about us. It's about playing our part in this bigger story.
That's a powerful message,
It is.
but it can feel overwhelming, like our actions don't really matter.
I get that it's easy to feel powerless.
So how do we combat that?
I think that's where the promise of resurrection is so important.
All right.
It reminds us that good will triumph, that love will win.
That beacon of hope.
Exactly. And it's not just about the future.
Right.
It's about experiencing that power now.
Okay.
Finding hope in the midst of despair, strength in weakness, love in hatred.
Tapping into that eternal perspective and letting it change how we live.
And recognizing that even in death, there is life.
That's powerful.
That's the message of hope, a hope that goes beyond our understanding.
Yeah, it makes you think we get so caught up in the day-to-day
I do.
that we forget the bigger picture.
That's why vigilance is so important.
Yeah, staying alert, connected to our faith.
Keeping our eyes on the horizon.
Remembering what matters.
Exactly, and finding joy in knowing we're part of something bigger.
Okay, we've covered so much.
We have.
Forgiveness, love, humility, faith, prayer, wisdom, God's sovereignty, evangelism, fruit of the Spirit, service, vigilance, and the promise of resurrection.
Wow.
All in the context of how they impact us today.
And the key takeaway is that these aren't just ideas.
Right.
They're tools for living a better life.
So as we move into our final segment,
Okay.
let's think about these lessons and how we can change our lives.
Sounds good.
We'll be back after a short break. So we've gone through all 13 of these lessons, and
We have.
it's really amazing how these teachings are so old, but still so relevant today.
Yeah, it really shows how powerful these principles are, you know? They speak to something deep within us, that need for meaning and purpose and connection.
And I think what's really stood out to me is how the text focuses on putting these teachings into practice.
Right. It's not just about knowing it. It's about living it.
Exactly. It's not just head knowledge. It's about how we live each day.
The source really makes that distinction, you know, between just knowing and actually doing.
Right. It's like bridging that gap between what we believe and how we behave.
It's like having all these tools, but the real challenge is learning how to use them.
Right. It's one thing to have the toolbox. It's another to actually build something.
Exactly.
And the source reminds us that we don't have to be perfect
No, absolutely not.
in this whole growth process.
It's about the journey,
Right.
not the destination.
It's about making progress, not being perfect.
And having the grace to know that we're going to mess up.
We all do.
Yeah, nobody gets it right all the time.
And that's where humility comes in again. Knowing our limits,
Yeah.
being open to learning and growing.
Especially when our culture tells us to do everything ourselves.
Right. Like we have to be perfect and have it all figured out.
It's about asking for help when you need it
Exactly.
and leaning on others.
Yeah. And that theme of surrender keeps coming up,
Yeah, surrender to something bigger than ourselves.
whether it's trusting God's plan or living by faith.
Or seeking wisdom through prayer.
It's about acknowledging that we're not always in control.
And finding freedom in that.
Yeah.
Finding peace and letting go.
Yeah. But I can imagine that's really hard when we're struggling with those big questions,
Oh, yeah.
like about suffering and injustice.
The meaning of life.
How do we reconcile those things with a loving God?
It's a tough one, and the source doesn't pretend it's easy,
Okay.
but it keeps pointing us back to the promise of resurrection
Yeah.
as this ultimate hope.
It's a reminder that this isn't all there is.
Right.
That death isn't the end.
It's a transition to something greater.
And it's not just about the future.
Right.
It's about experiencing that power now.
Finding hope in the midst of despair, strength in weakness,
Yeah.
love in the face of hate.
It's about letting that eternal perspective change how we live today.
And realizing that even in death,
Yeah.
there's life.
It's a powerful message of hope
A hope that goes beyond what we can understand.
that gives us a foundation for a life with meaning and purpose.
Exactly.
Well, we've really explored a lot in this deep dive.
Yeah.
These 13 biblical lessons and their power to transform us.
They offer us a path to peace, purpose, and fulfillment.
Yeah, they challenge us to grow and serve.
To become better people.
And they remind us that we're not alone.
Right. We have each other.
Our faith community.
And God's guidance.
And its incredible future to look forward to.
So keep learning.
Keep growing.
And keep the faith.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.